Jai Baba. None dies and none knows to die. The rare one who knows to die is never born again. Meher Baba. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Thanks to beloved Baba and Jai Baba to all of you. We are doing the session number 14 of Meher Baba on death. And we are reading from Listen Humanity, Meher Baba, page number 103.
Regardless of these shortcomings, death does give a severe shaking to the tree of sanskaras, root, trunk and branch, and this impels the mind to revise its attitude towards the objective universe. Death also facilitates a certain amount of disentanglement from the attractive world of form. The individual is never able to go back to earth without some modification of his approach to life.
So we can see here Baba is giving so much of importance to death. And the most important thing is that we are so cluttered and clasped by our samskaras or impressions. And Baba says that when death occurs, it actually gives a very solid shaking to the tree of life. And that means we are able to get rid of certain sanskaras or at least loosen up certain sanskaras. Regardless of these shortcomings which we did in our last session, death does give a severe shaking to the tree of sanskaras, root, trunk and branch. And this impels the mind to revise its attitude towards the objective universe. Once we have got this human form and we have a certain set pattern of thinking, we have a certain attitude, we have a certain tendency towards what is happening out there, the objective world. And then it is well nigh impossible, if not impossible, very difficult to change our perspective, to change our views, to change our way of looking at the objective world. And Baba says here that the death helps us to change our perspective of looking at the objective universe. Death also facilitates a certain amount of disentanglement from the attractive world of form. The individual is never able to go back to earth without some modification of his approach to life. So here lies the importance of death, that we are in a sense inert. We are so much accustomed to looking at a thing in a certain pattern, and there is no way of coming out of that rigmarole except one of the aspects, the powerful aspect is death. So when death occurs, we change our worldview, so to speak. So when we come back to incarnate form, after experiencing the state of heaven and hell, there is definitely some improvement, some change in our perspective of the world.
Life in a new physical body must conform to lines determined by the individual sanskaras. Thus, there is often a close resemblance to the past life on earth, but it is not a literal repetition of the past. It is a new experiment.
We have seen, and I'll try to reiterate, that what I am in this incarnate form, in this life, is a result of what I have accumulated in my past life. That we have done. We have seen that. In my past life, when I died and experienced whatever state, heaven or hell, that helped me to more or less come to a balance of my samskaras. In other words, much of my prepondering samskaras, either good or bad, have been experienced and negated and have been expanded, sort of used up. So now when I come back in a new form, that means now this form is nothing but the coagulated mold of the impression that are residually left after my experiencing the heaven and hell state. So Baba says that they are connected with our past life, but they are not exactly a repetition of the past life, because the combination, the mixture of samskaras are totally different from the past life. So here Baba says, I'll repeat, life in a new physical body must conform to lines determined by the individual samskaras. It cannot be dramatically changed. It has to have some residual mold of the past life. A wild thought that came to me right now is, in India at least we do that. How do we make curd or dahi? There is some dahi which is of the past that is applied to the vessel, and then you put in fresh milk. That becomes curd. Which you make it stand overnight, it becomes curd. But there is some residue of the past curd in it. There is something akin to past is there in the present day, but not exactly the same. Just a thought that... Sorry?
Sourdough bread.
Sourdough bread? What is that? I don't know. Anyway, so here what Baba is saying, I just a thought, passing thought. Thus, there is often a close resemblance to past life on earth, but it is not a literal repetition of the past. It is a new experience. So definitely, it's a new experiment. Thank you. It's a new experiment. Okay.
This readjustment of outlook, which is facilitated by the abrupt reorientation involved in death, is particularly helpful when it occurs after spiritual aspiration has been awakened in the individual. In such cases, the loosening of all attachment which occurs at death is very conducive to the further flowering of spiritual aspiration. The aspirant now has a chance under fresh circumstances to remodel the entire pattern of his life in line with his spiritual aspirations.
In other words, birth and death gives us opportunities, several opportunities, like how in school days or we have this, what is it called, test?
Unit test.
Unit test, correct. So if I have not done well in a particular subject, I get another opportunity to focus on that subject and make it better. So in other words, the entire flow of life and death is nothing but to help us grow in spirituality and finally achieve our goal. So here Baba says, this readjustment of outlook, which is facilitated by the abrupt reorientation involved in death. See, these are the positive aspects of death. There is a total reorientation, there is a total dissociation, there is a total detachment of all that we have gone through in the past, and you get an opportunity to reorient yourself, to look through your life's film in a very leisurely manner and learn from it and put it as a capsule in our being as the intuitive ability, and then move on from there. So it facilitates by the abrupt reorientation involved in that is particularly helpful when it occurs after spiritual aspiration has been awakened in the individual. So once the spiritual aspiration is awakened in the individual, by that I would mean that the understanding what is life all about, the understanding why the creation, knowing the creation as a divine incubator. I am repeating what we have already done earlier, as a divine incubator in which the consciousness of the soul incubates and becomes perfect. So creation is absolutely an essential in order to know and experience who we are not, and then wean away from that, then to just drop those areas of I am not this, I am not that. So spiritual aspiration would mean that we need to understand, even if it is intellectual, like we did, the aim of life is to love God and the goal of life is to become one with God. It is so crystal clear as to what for are we here on this earth. To love God, which means love our fellow being, which means to care, which means to protect, which means to be concerned about the well-being of the others, which means to accept as the other person is, which means to forgive them for whatever they have done. So all these are branches of love. And Baba says that the aim of life is to love God. Love God doesn't mean just one image of God. To love and be able to see God in each and every one and each and everything, and accordingly conduct ourselves in life. And the goal of life, there's only one goal: to become one with God. There is no other goal. And I keep repeating this, there is no creature which is not destined for the supreme goal, as there is no river which is not winding its way to the sea. So in other words, the goal of all life, the destiny for each and every one of us, is to experience oneness with God, or oneness with self, and experience what we call as self-realization or God-realization. So this spiritual aspiration, as Baba says, even if it is intellectual, it may not be experiential, but even if it is intellectual and internalized in our moment-to-moment living and applied in our life, will go a long way in helping us to have a very clearer picture of what the world is all about and what are we supposed to do or expected to do in our physical form. When it occurs after spiritual aspiration has been awakened in the individual, in such cases, the loosening of all attachment, which occurs at death, is very conducive to the further flowering of spiritual aspirations.
Beautiful.
So when the death happens and when there is a shaking, when there is a loosening, it helps us to move further in life. The aspirant now has a chance, under fresh circumstances, to remodel the entire pattern of his life in line with his spiritual aspirations. That means we are given every opportunity to remold our thinking, to realign our life in the light of our spiritual aspirations.
Because of these special opportunities which death offers, the aspirant does not regret his own death. For him, death is not a cloud without its silver lining. The perfect master, Jalaluddin Rumi, has said that he always progressed through frequent deaths. But this cannot justify anyone, and even less a spiritual aspirant, in seeking death for its own sake. To seek death in this manner is to put a false premium upon it. Such seeking of death springs from fear of life and from failure to cope with it, and inevitably must defeat its own purpose.
I'll read again. Because of these special opportunities which death offers, the aspirant does not regret his own death. If a person is already spiritually advanced, that means if he is an aspirant, he will accept death as something, as a new door which is opening and he is moving forward. But that does not mean that he should, in a sense, what Baba uses the word, that he should not invite death upon himself. But when it comes, he will accept it with grace, with honor, with equanimity, and with the understanding that he is moving further. Because of these special opportunities which death offers, the aspirant does not regret his own death. For him, death is not a cloud without a silver lining. That means it has something to offer, positive. The perfect master Jalaluddin Rumi has said that he always progressed through frequent deaths. Every time you die, you progress further. But this cannot justify anyone, and even less a spiritual aspirant, in seeking death for its own sake. So, do not seek death, but if it comes, accept it with nobility, with grace, and with equanimity. To seek death in this manner is to put a false premium upon it. That means if somebody is seeking death in the understanding that death will make you progress further, that means you are putting an extra premium on death, which is not correct, which is false. Such seeking of death springs from fear of life and from failure to cope with it. Why would people seek death? They are fearing life. They must have done something and they fear life, or they cannot cope up with the issues of life, and therefore they are seeking death. and inevitably must defeat its own purpose. The whole purpose, we have yesterday, last session, whatever, we did that there were different types of deaths. There is normal death, there is abnormal death, and then there is supernormal death. In normal death, we saw about illness, and then person dies, all the karmas are over. In abnormal death, Baba has given four areas. One is the accident, war, suicide, murder. Under suicide, again, Baba has demarcated lowest, low, high, and highest. So these are abnormal deaths. And then supernormal deaths we had seen where advanced yogi would voluntarily wind up his shop and give up the body, just like a student after passing his examinations would store his books. That we did it in the last session. So here, neither fear death nor invite death, but when death comes, accept it gladly and gloriously in the thought that it is going to help you further in your spiritual ongoing.
If death has any value, it is to teach the individual the true art of life. It would be wrong for the aspirant to seek death with the hope of making further progress thereby. On the other hand, he should not fear death when it overtakes him. A true aspirant neither seeks death nor fears it, and when death comes to him, he converts it into a stepping stone to the higher life.
Okay, I don't think it requires any further explanation. You have to accept it with grace, accept it with nobility, with the happiness that it will help you to progress further. Don't fear, don't invite, but accept. Okay.
Some people are particularly afraid of the exact moment of death because they anticipate unbearable pain at that instant. In reality, all physical suffering experienced during illness or just before death terminates at the moment of death. The process of the actual dropping of the body is quite painless, contrary to the superstition that a person experiences indescribable agonies in death.
So this is quite an extremely positive revelation which Baba is saying, in short, that on death, upon death, all your aches and pains and suffering just go away. Of course, provided you are not mentally attached. We are talking about the physicality, the physical pains and suffering. So some people are particularly afraid of the exact moment of death. Why are they afraid? Because they anticipate unbearable pain at that instant. Terrible pain, unbearable pain, excruciating pain. In reality, all physical suffering experienced during illness or just before death terminates at the moment of death. Such a super thing. Because the body is not there. What is suffering? It is the body which is experiencing the pain and the suffering because of the connection of the body with the mind. Because your experience is through the mind. But the moment the body is dropped, the body is no more connected or linked with the mind. So how can the mind now experience the pain and the suffering of the body when it is delinked? It's a very important thing to understand. I would like to repeat this, in reality, all physical suffering experienced during illness or just before death terminates at the moment of death. Death over. Okay. The process of the actual dropping of the body is quite painless, contrary to the superstition that a person experiences indescribable agonies in death. That is just a superstition that has no meaning. It is just people are, like hearsay, you may say. People are saying that, what sort of the moment a person is dead, we can be rest assured that there is no further pain or suffering to that person. The suffering may come to us. Sometimes, just again a thought, a very vague thought, Sometimes on the traffic, in a road, on a highway, you might see a dog or a cat or even a big animal lying dead. And we feel that, oh my God, what suffering it must be going through. No, it is just a carcass. It is just a coat. There is no suffering at all. At the time when the the car may have hit, that 1 second that pain may be there. But the moment the body is dissociated from the mind, there is no pain at all. So it is a superstition for us to believe that during death one experiences indescribable agonies.
However, the severing of the individual's emotional entanglement in the gross world is not found to be easy. The various religious rites observed after a death have primarily the purpose of helping the departing individual disentangle himself from these ties.
So just as I said a few minutes before, when we talk about agony and pain and suffering, we are talking about the physicality, the physical. The physical pain and suffering is not there because the body is now cut, dissociated from the mind. But the mental, emotional entanglement continues. And that is the reason why Baba has advocated that when a person dies, one should not have excessive brooding and crying and weeping, because the spirit of that person who has just died hovers around the physical form of himself, and he also experiences the trauma of those people who are mentally entangled with this soul. I hope I am making myself clear. So the best thing would be the prayers, like Baba says. So let me repeat. However, the severing, which means the cutting, the separation of the individual's emotional entanglement in the gross world is not found to be easy. If that is one of the reasons why Baba is advocating on detachment, on unattachment, on not being very personally involved with life and with world and with so many other things. Because if we get ourselves involved, but in a detached manner, then when that stroke comes of death, I don't mean a jhatka, a knife or something, for whatever reason, when that comes, you are already prepared. Why can't we prepare ourselves beforehand, knowing full well that these entanglements, these emotional bindings are going to be difficult for us to get rid of? So we try to be dissociated, we try to be detached. We will be loving, we will be caring, we will be concerned, but in a detached way, in a very unattached manner. The severing of the individual's emotional entanglement in the gross world is not found to be easy. The various religious rites observed after a death have primarily the purpose of helping the departing individual disentangle himself from these ties. So the ceremonies which normally take place with most religion for the first 3-4 days, the main purpose of those ceremonies is to dissociate this soul from the gross entanglement and ties, and allowing the soul this onward journey towards the semi-subtle world or the astral world. So ceremonies are, in a sense, important, to help the soul dissociate with the ties of the gross.
For instance, the repetition of the name of God or of scriptures, often practiced after the death of a person, has a wholesome effect both on those who have been left behind as well as on the one who has passed away, because they help to free both parties of their mutual sanskaric attachment to form.
So these prayers, nam jap, repetition of God's name, or whatever religious prayers are there, they are helpful to the soul who has departed, and also to the soul, also to all of us who are still on earth.
On the other hand, the lamentation and wailing that is often observed has a degrading and depressing effect both on those left behind as well as on the person who has passed away, for it tends to strengthen mutual attachment to form.
So Baba is very clearly saying that this lamentation, crying, weeping, wailing, huge noises of crying and all that, there are certain systems, I don't know, communities where they even call people from outside to weep and wail and all that. but what could be the reason, I do not know. We don't want to get into those areas. But what Baba is saying is that lamentation and weeping and wailing actually is harmful for both, as they, what Baba talks about is that they harden or they make strong the emotional ties. Whereas here we are supposed to make the person go comfortably on the other side in order to enjoy or whatever, the astral world.
The thought or wish the dying individual holds at the moment of death has special importance in determining his future destiny. If the last thought is of God or the Master, the individual achieves liberation.
Here also Baba is again very extremely emphatically saying that the last thought of a person before he dies has a very important impact on that particular spirit in the after death, as well as in the reincarnation aspect of that particular spirit or soul. And then Baba goes on to say that if the last thought of the dying person is of God or the Master, then the person achieves liberation or moksha. Liberation or moksha or mukti simply means that that soul will experience infinite bliss eternally. That soul will not have to reincarnate again. He is liberated from the rounds of births and deaths. Such an important aspect which all of us should give importance to and focus on. And if we have the opportunity of helping somebody, now suppose any of our parents, grandparents, or whosoever, spouse, you know that the person is about to die in a few minutes. And if you are fortunate to be around the person, then encourage that person to take God's name, whichever God that you believe in. But most of us, what do? We have seen it. I have personally experienced it, We will slap the person and see who is standing over there. See your daughter, see your son, see your this, see your... So basically we are trying to pull that person's mind towards the illusory Mayavic world, little realizing that we are doing so much of harm to that person. Instead of that, if we pray to the person, if you sit by the side, pray to the person and say, go towards God, go towards light, you absolutely talk in such a manner that don't worry about anything concerning this life, everything is going to be okay. Now your job is to only think about God. And it has a very, very, I would not say very, very important, it's the most important thing. It is the most important thing for anybody to help somebody else to achieve mukti or moksha by helping that person to remember God when you know that they are about to breathe their last. I am, 1 minute, digressing. I remember, to the best of my remembrance, I'll go a little in deep. Sorabji Desai, Soma Desai, was a very, very close disciple of Meher Baba. He was from Navsari. And I don't want to go into the deep details of it. And in that family, there was a marriage between the groom and the bride, two different brother's husband, a brother's son and another brother's daughter. They were getting married. And they were close to Meher Baba's. The entire family was very close. The gentleman who was getting married was Colonel M.B. Desai, Colonel Minu Desai, who happens to be the brother of Mansari. And he was one of our founder trustees of the Avatar Meher Baba Bombay Center. And the wife, Bapai, was the daughter. So they were supposed to be get married. And they don't do anything without asking Meher Baba. So they did write to Meher Baba about this is the marriage, and this is how I remember. Give us a date. So Baba gave a certain date. On this date you get married. And so it was decided. In between, Sorabji's health deteriorated. So doctor was called and doctor said that he doesn't have much to live. So they called up Baba by whatever means, maybe telegram or something. In those days there were telegrams. That Baba, this is the case, what do we do? Should we prepone or postpone or something, change the date? And Baba said, no, keep the date as it is. Then as the days rolled by, again he was so serious that the doctor was to be called, and the doctor came and tested him and said that he won't even survive this night. By tomorrow morning he's gone. So it is best that you cancel the marriage or something. Again the telegram was sent, and Baba again said the same thing. That no, keep the date as it is. That was almost 4 days after when doctor said that he's going to die. Keep the date as it is. I'll be coming. I'll be attending the marriage. So on that day of marriage, Baba attended with some of his Mandali people. And the moment Baba went, Baba said, I have come now. He enters Saurabji's room, where Saurabji for the last 3-4 days was more or less in a state of coma. He had no consciousness. So the moment Baba enters the room, this is how I've heard the story. Baba enters the room. Saurabji in his, even he was in coma, he opens the eyes and tries to wake up, tries to get up. And Baba very lovingly holds both the shoulders and makes him sleep again and says, now I have come. You have nothing to worry. Your job now is to constantly take my name. I have come. The importance that Baba gives about taking his name. So you just do this. Now, the ceremony, the marriage ceremony is going on over there, and the marriage ceremony is over. The moment the marriage ceremony is over, the couple, Bapaimai and comes to Baba to bow down to Baba, and Baba says, go quickly and pay your respects to your uncle, Saurabji. Saurabji Desai, Soma Desai. So the couple goes and, the moment the couple goes and bows down to him, he opens his eyes, takes both the hands like this, and drops dead. And drops dead on the spot. And Baba, obviously Baba knows. Then Baba told these people, do not announce this death now in the gathering. Allow them to enjoy. Let them enjoy, let them have the feast, and then we will make the announcement. And then Baba, of course, this is what happened, and Baba goes away. Now, this is the story which we got to know from somewhere, Now, this couple had a daughter. She was a doctor, Dr. Meher Desai. She is also in Bombay. She was in Bombay. So one fine day, we happened to go to her place. She invited us, we went, we talked. And I told Dr. Meher, that I have heard this story about your parents during the marriage. This is how Baba had blessed them and all that. So I narrated the whole story. Is that correct? Because if I announce it to somebody, it should be correct, authentic, She said, everything that you said was correct. But you have missed out on a very important thing, most important thing. I said, what is that? Baba said that Saurabji was in a sense dead 4 days before. The doctor said, no, that today he won't survive the night. He was dead the 4 days before. In Gujarati I say, ये तो मरी गयेला, ये तो मैं मांजो पकड़ी राख्यो. That means the kite has a string. You know what the kite and the string. So actually he was dead. But I kept holding on to the string of the kite so that it remains in the air for these 4 days, because I had to come and bless the couple at that time. So the important thing is the importance of remembering Baba at the time of breathing our last can never be underestimated. That is the most important thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? So, 4 days prior to the wedding, what was his name?
Saurabji.
Saurabji died.
Died in the sense, what doctor said on that day, that he won't survive till the morning. He is almost gone. Message was sent to Baba, and Baba said, don't worry, let the date of the marriage remain. I will come and witness the marriage. So that the difference was of 4 days. So on the fourth day, the marriage took place, ceremony took place, Baba blessed. Die, not in the sense die, but means technically what the doctor said was correct. But he held on to the string of the kite so as to keep him alive for those 4 days.
So Baba said that मैं मांझा पकड़े रखी हूँ.
हाँ, मैंने मांझा पकड़ के रखा है. That's what. Yeah.
He
What
would have died,
had
but Baba held
Baba
on
kept him alive for 4 days so as to keep the marriage going,
so
instead
as
of.
to give
And-
Sorabji Baba's darshan.
And Baba gave the instruction.
To continue with the same date. Don't change the date.
Yeah, that's also. And Baba gave the instruction on his deathbed that keep repeating my name.
Yes. Baba comes and says, now that I have come, you don't be concerned or worried about anything. Simply keep repeating my name. That way. A similar thing happened to Papa Jasawala. We know Papa Jasawala, Irach Merwan's Manu's father. He was ill in Bindra house, and during that time, I think it was Rano Geli was also very ill. So Papa Jasawala sends a message to Baba saying that she's a Westerner, she's a foreigner, she's staying with me in the house. If she dies, it could create some kind of complications and all that. So Baba sends a word, you do not worry about Rano. You remember to continue to take my name that way. And actually it happened that Rano survived for many years later, but he died. But Baba gave the instructions that you continue taking my name. You don't have to worry about Rano. That is my concern, my botheration. You worry about just remembering my name. Keep remembering me. And that is when he died. And when he died, Baba asked Eraj, so we got the news that your father is no more. What do you want to do? Would you like to go? Baba, he was so matured in that sense. Baba, whatever you say, it doesn't. And that is where Baba asked Eraj, do you know what death is? And how do you feel when you die? What is the feeling during death? Of course, Eraj did not say anything. Then Baba said, assume that you are traveling somewhere, and all of a sudden you have a very, very powerful urge to ease yourself, to release. You want to go for a potty, to speak in the terminology, crude. And you just cannot find any place. You just want to go, but you can't. But all of a sudden you find a place, and when you go there and touch, how do you feel? So Baba says, when the soul leaves the body, that is the feeling of relief that is coming to that person. But provided we are not entangled and enmeshed in the emotional aspects. That's why Baba says that at the point of death, there is no pain, there is no suffering, there is no trauma. But if you are emotionally entangled, then that will take a little time for you to dissociate and tear ourselves from that. And for that purpose only, the rites and the rituals and the prayers and the Nam Jap and the repetition of God's name, that helps us, that helps the soul to dissociate in a very orderly manner and go to the other side. So herein lies the importance, great importance of remembering Baba's name when we breathe our last. Even in his My Wish, that is the last point where he says, I say with my divine authority to each and all that whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. And when Charles Purdom asked him, what is the meaning of comes to me? Baba clarified, comes to me means that particular soul achieves mukti or moksha or liberation. That particular soul experiences infinite bliss eternally. And then Baba clarifies, it is not a state of God realization, because God realization, the experiences of infinite knowledge, infinite power and infinite bliss. But here it is only infinite bliss. And God realization, you ought to be in a physical body in order to experience the Aham Brahmasmi state, the Analhak state, self-realization. But this mukti, which is also known as ordinary mukti or najat mukti, can be had even about 3 to 5 days. I think it may come in this reading. 3 to 5 days after the body is dropped. So if we are not destined for God realization, at least we can have mukti. That is, and my personal feeling is that that should not be so difficult if we are focused on remembering Baba in everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. And we pray to him, we beseech, please help us to remember you when we breathe our last. Maybe he will grant that wish. And then you are out of the so-called chakkar, cycle of births and deaths. All right, go ahead. It is quite common.
It is quite common for an individual not to have any specific thought at the moment of death. Even if he has had thoughts or wishes before death, he will tend to forget them at the time of death. At that moment, some people hope they may not return to earthly life, but they are not exempted from rebirth by mere wishing. They are reborn, but exhibit a pronounced disgust for life and tend to lead the lives of ascetics or recluses.
So Baba says that very often it happens that you may have several thoughts just before dying, but at the point of death, you may have no thought, that way. So it is quite common for an individual not to have any specific thought at the moment of death. So we should not get into that slot of having no thought. In fact, we should get into a slot where we have the thought of remembering beloved Baba. Even if he has had thoughts or wishes before that, he will tend to forget them at the time of death. At that moment, some people hope they may not return to earthly life. The hope is that, I don't want to return to, but that doesn't help. What Baba says, but they are not exempted from rebirth by merely wishing. They are reborn, but exhibit a pronounced disgust for life and tend to lead the lives of ascetics or recluse. That means austere life of absistence, like that. So, just because you are wishing that you are not reborn does not give that liberty of you to experience infinite bliss. You are reborn, but with a different bent of mind, where you are a recluse, you are an ascetic, you want to be in seclusion, you are having absenteeism, absistence, that kind of thing. If the good
and evil sanskaras of the individual are almost balanced at the time of death, he may take on a new physical body almost immediately. He may even enter a new incarnation as early as the 4th day after death. In such urgent cases of rebirth, the individual can enliven a ready fetus any time between the 6th and 7th months of embryological development. It is important to note that both father and mother give only prana or vital energy to the fetus. In addition to receiving prana, it must be enlivened by some individualized soul. Ordinarily, this takes place during the later stages of embryological development. There is an asterisk for good
and evil
sanskaras. Good actions leave sanskaric residues in the individual's subconscious as surely as do bad actions. Therefore, the individual may be bound just as surely by the golden chains forged by good actions as by the iron chains of bad actions.
That we already know. All right. If the good and evil sanskaras of the individual are almost balanced at the time of death, he may take on a new physical body almost immediately. Now if somebody asks, and we have been asked, how much time do we spend in the astral world, semi-subtle world, enjoying the state of heaven or suffering the state of hell? It is like asking a question, when a baby is born, how much is the baby going to live? 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years? We do not know. Why? Because everything is dependent upon the samskaras or impressions. At the time of death, if the prepondering samskaras, yesterday, day before, whenever we did that, if there are a good number of good sanskaras, imbalance, this is bad, this is good, then that particular soul, will enjoy a long period of time in the state of heaven. Similarly, if the bad ones are more, then the soul will spend a long period of time in the state of hell. The game is to balance the samskaras. That is the game. Now, at the point of that, if there is very little imbalance, not like this, very little imbalance, then what does it mean? It means that the soul will reincarnate immediately, because the imbalance is very little. So here Baba says that if the good and evil samskaras of the individual are almost balanced, it can never be balanced of its own accord, because for that we need the help of the living perfect master or the avatar, who is the eternal living perfect master. Of our own accord, of our own effort, we cannot do it, because the samskaras have to be balanced qualitatively and quantitatively, which is well nigh impossible for us to do by ourselves. So Baba says if they were almost balanced at the time of death, he may take on a new body almost immediately. And then Baba goes on to say, he may even enter a new incarnation as early as the 4th day after death. That means after the 3 days, 4 days ceremony, the 4th day he can enter into reincarnation if the samskaras are very, very little that way. In such urgent cases of rebirth, the individual can enliven a ready fetus any time between the 6th and the 7th month of embryological development. So here we get a clue, sort of, that the soul or the spirit enters the mother's womb around that period of time, not at the 3rd month or 4th month or like that way. We get some clue over here. It is important to note that both father and mother give only prana or vital energy to the fetus. In addition to receiving prana, it must be enlivened. There must be an individualized soul, or soul you can say, yeah. It must be enlivened by some individualized soul. Ordinarily, this takes place during the later stages of embryological development, where earlier on it was said around 6th or 7th month of pregnancy.
When the individual is ready for reincarnation, he is automatically drawn to his future parents by sanskaric links. The parents act as a magnet due to their previous connections with the reincarnating individual. Occasionally, the strongest sanskaric or karmic link which the reincarnating individual has with incarnate individuals is not with the parents but with the brother or sister. It is this link then that determines the family in which he takes birth.
So now, after experiencing the so-called heaven or the so-called hell state, the soul is now ready for reincarnation. Now, where will that soul reincarnate? In the east or in the west? In a poor family or a rich family? In whether the soul in his lifetime would be healthy or weak, would be handsome or ugly, whatever. All this is determined by the residual karmas or samskaras that are left off after experiencing the hell and the heaven state. Here Baba says that everything is happening automatically. In other words, the parents, the mother and the father, act like a magnet for that soul to come and enliven, that particular fetus. Baba says when the individual is ready for reincarnation, he is automatically drawn to his future parents by sanskaric link. That means there is a link between that family and the soul which is wanting to reincarnate. The parents act as a magnet due to their previous connection with the reincarnating individual. Occasionally, now this is another very good revelation where Baba says, occasionally the strongest sanskaric or karmic link which the reincarnating individual has with incarnate individuals is not with the parents, but with a brother or sister. So the link which actually brings, the magnet which actually pulls that soul is with a brother or a sister. It is this link then that determines the family in which he takes birth. So in other words, today we might see that there is either absolute love and affection and goodness and care and concern between the brothers and brothers, sisters and sisters, or brothers and sisters, sister and brother, or they would be like enemies. They would be fighting for property, fighting for this, fighting for that. Why? Because there was a previous connection, there was a previous link. So the link between a brother and sister, which could mean brother and brother, sister and sister, whatever it is the strongest in order to pull that reincarnating soul into that family. Another thought which I felt like sharing is, many people believe that since I am born in a particular nakshatra or astrological sign, that is why I am suffering, or that is why I am having all these problems. And the thought may come, as I very jocularly said, had my mother held on to me instead of believing in what the doctor said, push, push, instead of doing that, if my mother would have held on to me before giving delivery for another 1 hour or 2 hours or half an hour, I would have been born in another, zodiac, in another zodiac, and my life would have been so beautiful, my life would have been so prosperous or whatever, positive. So that, according to me, is not the correct thought. It is not that because you are born in a certain zodiac that you are suffering or you are enjoying your life. It is the fact of the matter, according to my understanding, is that you, as a soul, chose automatically through sanskaric, mathematical, you can say, reasons, sorry? Calculations, okay. The sanskaric calculations are such that you chose to be born in a particular zodiac sign so that you get maximum opportunity of spending out the past samskaras. If the predominant samskaras are supposedly negative, we call it negative, where you are expected to go through suffering, ill treatment, whatever, insults and all that, then because the samskaras are such, you will gravitate only towards that particular zodiac, that particular family, that particular culture, that particular country, continent, whatever it is, which will afford you the maximum opportunity to wipe off those residual samskaras. So it is not that we are suffering or enjoying because we are born in a particular zodiac sign, but we chose, in that sense, not consciously, but unconsciously, through calculation of the sanskaras, we chose to be born in a particular zodiac sign so that we experience what experience we require and do away with our past samskaras or impressions.
In times of emergency, as in wars or epidemics, when thousands of individuals may seek immediate reincarnation, it is not always possible for all to be born into families having strong previous links with them. But if the sanskaric status of the individual is precipitating him towards incarnation, his taking on of a body is not postponed merely because parents are not available to provide a suitable previous link. It is possible, through the intervention of the masters, to make infinite adjustments through mutual exchanges.
So here Baba says that in times of war, when so many hundreds and thousands of soldiers die, and obviously the samskaras that they have brought are not fully exhausted. So in other words, they need to take immediate reincarnation. Now, in order to have reincarnation, they must have a proper place where they can go based on the past sanskaris link. Baba says that if they do not find the exact proper parents to reincarnate in, that does not mean that they will not reincarnate. All the same, they will reincarnate to whosoever is available without the previous link. And for that, the masters do a lot of readjustment, sanskaric readjustment. Now, my understanding is this, that sometimes we do find that both the parents are, let's say, very mild, very docile, very gentle, but the child becomes very rowdy. Child is very much different. Sometimes they wonder, is that our child? It's like that. Or there are children who are so indifferent to the parents. They don't even express any kind of love or attachment or connection with the parents. This could be that because they were forced to be born to the parents where they do not have any previous sanskaric link. So when there is no link, where is the question of, we call it give and take, adan pradan? There is nothing like that. So let us read again. In times of emergency, as in wars or epidemics, when thousands of individuals may seek immediate reincarnation, it is not always possible for all to be born into families having strong previous links with them. But if the sanskaric status of the individual is precipitating him towards incarnation, that means the sanskaric pattern is such that he must take an reincarnation, he must come to earth. Then what happens? His taking on of a body is not postponed. Okay, you are not finding a proper parent, so now next year we'll make you come to earth. No. Okay. Is not postponed merely because parents are not available to provide a suitable previous link. It is possible through the intervention of the masters to make infinite adjustment through mutual exchanges. Masters can do anything.
Death is like throwing away clothes which have become useless through wear and tear. Just as a traveler may stop at different places and at each halt may change clothes according to his needs, so the individual goes on changing his bodies according to the needs of his sanskaras.
So in other words, depending upon the sanskaras, the bodies keep on changing. Healthy, sick, brilliant, duffer, Easterner, Westerner, this religion, that religion. So it is just like changing of clothes. That's what Baba is saying. That is like throwing away clothes which have become useless through wear and tear. Just as a traveler may stop at different places and at each halt may change clothes according to his needs, so the individual goes on changing his bodies according to the needs of his sanskaras.
Death may also be compared to sleep. When a man goes to sleep, he wakes up in the same physical body. When he drops his physical body at death, he wakes up in another physical body.
So that's the difference. Death is like sleep only, because when we go to sleep, sound sleep I am saying, sound sleep state, we don't know that we are there. So it is like death only, basically. Only thing is that we wake up in the same body, whereas when we die in the sense, not in the real sense, when we die in the physical sense, we wake up in another body.
For most persons, the period between death and birth is one of absorption in subjectivity. As mentioned before, after death, the ego mind of the individual normally retains its tie with the remnants of the physical body for 3 or 4 days. After this period, the connection is completely severed and the individual then exists entirely in the subjectivity of his mental states. This subjective phase is brought about by the resurrection of all the sanskaras which the ego mind has brought along with it after death.
We've done this, we repeat it. For most persons, the period between death and birth is one of absorption in subjectivity. Subjectivity means my own thought processes, mental thought processes. I am absorbed in that. I am able to see a clearer picture of what I have gone through, and I am able to make amends and make changes in mentally, that next time when I get an opportunity, I will do what I had not done, or I will not do what I have done, which I am supposedly not correct. When he drops his physical body at death, he wakes. As mentioned before, after death, the ego mind of the individual normally retains its tie with the remnant of the physical body for 3 to 4 days. Baba again emphasizes that the connection of the spirit with the body remains for about 3 or 4 days. After that, that is where the prayers are very necessary. That is where the repetition of God's name is very necessary. That is where people should not lament and cry and weep and wail and allow the soul to have its ongoing, spiritual ongoing. After this period, the connection is completely severed and the individual then exists entirely in the subjectivity of its mental state. In other words, after that, it enters the astral world or the semi-subtle world, disconnected with the gross world, and experiences acute mental happiness in the heaven state or acute mental suffering in the hell state. These are mental states. They are not places that we know. Thus, this subjective phase is brought about by the resurrection of all the sanskaras which the ego mind has brought along with it after death. Now, when you resurrect what do you see? You will see all the sanskaras which you have brought around in the after death state. So, what do we see? Sorry. What do we see is all that we have lived through in the past life. And in an earlier session, we have said that this is a very, very great opportunity for us, not only to relive what we have already lived, but to go through it and to understand and to learn the lessons from what we should be doing or what we should not be doing in the next incarnation.
The sudden transplanting of the ego mind from one sphere to another does wear out the scars of the sanskaras to some extent, but for the greater part they remain intact. If death had resulted in the complete wiping out of all the sanskaric scars on the mind, it would have resulted in emancipation of the individual from all limitation. But this does not happen. Not only are the sanskaric imprints retained after death, but they may unroll unhampered in the life after death.
More or less a repetition of the thought. The sudden transplanting of the ego mind from one sphere, which is the gross sphere, to another, which is the semi-subtle or the astral sphere, does wear out the scars of the sanskaras to some extent. Elsewhere, Baba said that shock will loosen up the sanskaras. But for the greater part, they remain intact. I mean, it does shake up, but it is not that they are completely lost. If death has resulted in the complete wiping out of all the sanskaric scars on the mind, it would have resulted in emancipation of the individual from all limitations if there was a complete balance of samskaras. That means if it has resulted in complete wiping out, if the samskaras are balanced out, then finish. There is no mind, and if there is no mind, you experience in liberation, mukti. But that doesn't happen. That's what Baba says. But this does not happen. Not only are the sanskaric imprints retained after death, but they may unroll unhampered in the life after death. In other words, not only are they retained, but they will unroll. They will come on the screen of your subjective, mental subjective experiences, and you will see that film roll going right in front of your eyes.
As the sanskaric sheet is unwound, the individual experiences in the hell or heaven state the sufferings or pleasures embodied in the bad and good sanskaras. Every individual has both classes in his store, and his mental state in the life after death is determined by which of these preponderates.
So, as the sanskaric sheet is unwound, that means you are experiencing on the screen of your consciousness whatever the residual samskaras are there. The individual experiences in the hell or heaven state, suffering. Every individual has, this is important, every individual has both classes of samskaras. At any given point in time, I will have bad samskaras, I will have good samskaras. After that, whether I will experience heaven or hell depends upon which samskars are in preponderance. That means which samskaras are heavier, which samskaras are more. Preponderance means excess quantity. Which is heavy, which is in excess. Accordingly, I will only experience either the hell state or the heaven state. It is not both.
The intensity of the sufferings or pleasures which the individual experiences through these revived sanskaras is so great that a greater exhaustion of these sanskaras is brought about during a relatively short period than is possible in hundreds of years of suffering or pleasure in the earthly life. It is these posthumous mental states of intense suffering and pleasure which are respectively known in religious literature as hell and heaven. In popular belief, they are incorrectly regarded as places or spheres. It is more appropriate to speak of a hell state or heaven state rather than places.
I think we know, but still I'll read it. The intensity of the sufferings in the subjective, acute mental, subjective pleasure or suffering, it is so intense that we are able to get rid of so much of our samskaras in very short period. If the same amount of samskaras were to be experienced as life on earth, it would have taken a very long period, because the suffering or the pleasure is buffered or cushioned because of the physical body. But now that the physical body is not there, the suffering and the pleasure is multiplied to, let's say, X factor, as a result of which we are able to get rid of our samskaras more quickly and more efficiently. The intensity of the sufferings or pleasure which the individual experiences through these revived sanskaras is so great that a greater exhaustion of these samskaras is brought about during a relatively short period than is possible in hundreds of years of suffering or pleasure in the earthly life. Because here there is no cushioning, it just finishes off much quickly, much faster. In these posthumous mental states, posthumous would mean states after death, posthumous mental states of intense suffering and pleasure, which are respectively known in religious literature as hell and heaven. We know this. In popular belief, they are incorrectly regarded as places or spheres. It is more appropriate to speak of a hell state or heaven state rather than places. It is a state of mind, and it is not a place or it is not a sphere.
When there is a preponderance of evil sanskaras at death, the individual gradually exhausts the bad sanskaras through suffering in the hell state. The result is that the evil sanskaras eventually tend to strike a balance with the good sanskaras. It is as if a huge block of ice were placed on one pan of a balance, causing it to sink because of its excess over a smaller weight contained on the counterbalance pan. As the great block of ice is gradually melted and the water spills, there is a tendency for the two pans to come into balance.
So this we have done it in the earlier session, that the prepondering samskara, those which are heavy, those which are excess, it means that there's an ice block kept, a huge block of ice kept, and as the ice is melting, you are suffering or enjoying both ways, and it is now melting and the water is spilling out of the pan, so it's becoming lighter and lighter and lighter till it comes to almost near balance, never balanced.
Similarly, as the mass of evil sanskaras become attenuated through suffering, their preponderance begins to vanish and they almost come into balance with the good sanskaras. This moment, when the two opposite types of sanskaras are almost in a state of balance, is the moment when the afterlife of the individual terminates and he finds himself precipitating into a new physical incarnation on earth. He is precipitated into a new physical body because no further purpose is served by continuation of his subjective absorption in the discarnate life. He is ripe to accumulate fresh experience in another gross body, and for this purpose he must adopt a vehicle which is suitable for the working out of his unexhausted sanskaras.
Correct. Similarly, as the mass of evil sanskaras become accentuated, becomes
Attenuated.
attenuated, becomes more prominent, noticeable, heightened, that's the meaning. Through suffering, their preponderance begins to vanish and they almost come into a balance with the good samskaras. As I said, they are now becoming lighter and lighter, almost balanced. This moment, when the two opposite types of sanskaras are almost in a state of balance, is the moment when the afterlife of the individual terminates and he finds himself precipitating means it now trying to come about, bringing about into a new physical incarnation on earth. So when does the new physical incarnation on earth takes place? When the balance between the so-called good and bad samskaras are almost near balance. That is when we come down. When we come down with what? With those which are heavier samskaras. Even then there is a heavier samskara. Unexperienced, unutilized samskara. We come with that. And that is why Baba had said in an earlier that when you come into life, you have almost near balance. So this is an opportunity for you to balance it and go out of the race. But unfortunately, in the incarnate life, that so-called almost balance becomes so wide, and that is why every time, every birth is an opportunity, every death is an opportunity. So here, he is precipitated into a new physical body because no further purpose is served by continuation of his subjective absorption in the discarnate life. Now, discarnate life is over, now incarnate life starts. After incarnate life again, there is a discarnate. So this keeps on like a pendulum. He is ripe to accumulate fresh experience in another gross body, and for this purpose, he must adopt a vehicle, a form, which is suitable for the working out of his unexhausted samskaras. So every time a new birth takes place, the whole purpose is to experience the unexhausted samskaras. But in the process, we accumulate more and more fresh samskaras.
If the individual soul has been exhausting an excess of evil sanskaras and has therefore been undergoing a hell state, he may jump into a new incarnation in which good sanskaras tend to dominate. The cause of this unexpected reversal is to be found in the strength of flow of the sanskaric currents. At the time he incarnates, the individual had already been relieved of the excess of his evil sanskaras, and the strong tide of his good sanskaras was about to predominate. Consequently, it is the vigorous current of the good sanskaras which motivates him in his new incarnation. Thus, a man who had been a profligate in his last life might begin his new incarnation with the marked inclination towards asceticism.
So now here Baba says, assuming that at the point of the earlier death, the evil sanskaras were in preponderance. This is, okay, I'll put this as evil. Evil sanskaras are in preponderance. So gradually with the suffering, it comes, and this is the stage where the person is supposed to take birth. But if the current or the force or the vigor of the evil samskaras that is suffering is much faster, is much, the velocity is much higher, then sometimes it may happen that the person is suffering. It crosses over, and now it has crossed over the good samskaras. So now what is remaining, the prepondering samskaras are good samskaras. So when that soul takes birth, it will start on the good side, although when it died last time, it was having too much of evil side. So this kinds of balancing keeps on happening. If the individual soul has been exhausting an excess of evil sanskaras and has therefore been undergoing a hell state, he may jump into a new incarnation in which good sanskaras tend to dominate. The example I have given. The cause of this unexpected reversal is to be found in the strength of flow of the sanskaric current, because the strength of flow of the sanskaric current was so much that he over-suffered and went on to the other side. It could be true of the other side also, over-indulgent in pleasure. At the time he incarnates, the individual has already been relieved of the excess of his evil sanskaras, and the strong tide of his good sanskaras was about to predominate. Consequently, it is the vigorous current of the good sanskaras which motivate him in his new incarnation. Now what is prepondering? Now what is more? Good sanskaras. So he will start with a good life. Thus a man who had been a profligate would be very reckless, extravagant, indulgent, immoral, in his last life might begin his new incarnation with a marked inclination towards asceticism. Asceticism would be self-restraint, self-denial, etc., austerity, etc.
Conversely, a swing over can occur from good to bad when one jumps into an incarnation from a heaven state in which the preponderance of good sanskaras had been exhausted through intense imaginative pleasure. The moment of incarnation into a new physical body is precipitated when the good and the bad sanskaras have almost balanced each other and the tide of the bad sanskaras is about to predominate.
So in other words, the opposite of what we just did can also be possible. When I died, I had too many good sanskaras, but I kept on indulging in extra indulgence, in imaginative pleasure, as a result of which this experiencing of pleasure, these are the good samskaras, should have stopped at this juncture and I should have reincarnated. Instead, I was imaginatively having more pleasure. So now the pen has gone reverse and say I will start with the so-called negative sanskara. So both can happen.
A changeover at incarnation from good to bad or from bad to good should not be taken as a universal law. Reversal of individual nature is frequent, but cases are also quite common in which the individual remains persistently good or bad for several incarnations.
So these are exceptions where there is a change of nature. By and large, there is a persistently good nature or a persistently not so good nature.
In such cases, incarnation occurs before the opposite type of sanskaras has built up a sufficient current of flow to result in its predominance.
That means this kind of flip over is not a very common factor. By and large, a person who has started with the negative karma ends up also with the negative karma for several lifetimes. It is rarely that the sort of flip over can happen, but it does happen. The
beginning of the true existence of the individual self occurs at the moment when consciousness, in the course of its evolution, adopts its first human form. This also represents the terminal step in its evolutionary development. This is the moment when the limited individuality is crystallized as the I that exhibits the basic characteristic of self-consciousness. This is true birth of the individual. There's an asterisk
for the word self.
For the word individual self. not to be confused with the manifestation of the individual soul, which occurred at the very beginning of the long evolutive process through the various subgaseous, gaseous, stone, metal, vegetable, fish, and animal forms. See God Speaks, Meher Baba.
Okay. The beginning of the true existence of the individual self occurs at the moment when consciousness, in the course of its evolution, adopts its first human form. So, what Baba is saying about the ego mind or ego self, it starts from the first human form. This also represents the terminal step in the evolutionary development. Terminal would mean the final, concluding, last step. The first human form is the last step in the evolutionary development. Because after the human form, there is no evolutionary development, there is only reincarnation, involution, and realization. That's what Baba is trying to differentiate. This is the moment when the limited individuality is crystallized as the I that exhibits the basic characteristic of self-consciousness. This is the true birth of the individual. In other words, the true birth of the individual happens at the very first human form. Before that, the consciousness keeps on evolving. After the first human form, there is no further evolution of consciousness.
The true death of the individual occurs at that moment when he transcends his limited individuality or separative consciousness by being taken up in the truth consciousness of the unlimited and undivided being of God. The true death of the individual consists in the complete disappearance of the limiting ego mind that has created the sanskaric veil of ignorance. True death is far more difficult process than physical death, but when it occurs through the grace of the Master, it takes no longer than the twinkling of an eye. This dissolution of the ego mind and the freeing of the soul from the illusion of separative limited individuality are known as liberation.
The true death of the individual. We have done that earlier. That this death is not the true death. The true death is the death of the ego mind, the death of finiteness, the death of separateness, the death of the so-called I, the separative, self-centric, egocentric I. The true death of the individual occurs at that moment when he transcends, that means he goes above, goes beyond, when he transcends his limited individuality or separative consciousness by being taken up, sucked up, in the truth consciousness of the unlimited and undivided being of God. That means true death is equivalent to liberation, mukti, moksha, salvation, or God realization. The true death of the individual consists in complete disappearance of the limiting ego mind that has created the sanskaric veil of ignorance. The true birth is when we have started separately from the whole, from the other. We have done that in God Speaks, the bubble of separation. And the true death is when the bubble bursts and the soul experiences I am God state. True death is far more difficult process than physical death, obviously. But when it occurs through the grace of the Master, that means true death cannot occur without the grace of the Master. When it does occur through the grace of the Master, it takes no longer than a twinkling of an eye. In a moment it happens. This dissolution of the ego mind and the freeing of the soul from the illusion of separative, limited individuality are known as liberation. So what is liberation? Liberation from all separateness, liberation from all individuality. There is individuality, but there is divine individuality. There is the I alone am or I am God state. Do we stop here or what do you say?
27 minutes.
You want us to go ahead?
1 hour, 27 minutes.
1 hour?
27 minutes.
Abhi ho gaya. So maybe I think that 3 minutes more. Let me see the next paragraph. Okay, science, finish the third paragraph.
The sanskara-ridden ego mind can never attain any real poise. It vacillates in constant rhythm to the alternating dominant sanskaras. Consciousness can attain true poise only when the ego mind with all its attendant sanskaras terminates. This is effected through the emergence of the unlimited and ultra sanskaric individuality that comes into its own upon the inheriting of conscious eternal existence, which is true immortality.
The samskara-ridden ego mind. Ego mind is always having sanskaras, either the so-called good or the so-called bad. The sanskara-ridden ego mind can never attain any real poise, equanimity. It vacillates.
Vacillates.
Sorry?
It vacillates.
Vacillates. It vacillates. Vacillates would mean waver, oscillate, like a pendulum. It vacillates in constant rhythm to the alternating dominant sanskaras. The sanskaras, sometimes they are dominant, the good sanskaras are dominant, sometimes the not good or the bad or the evil sanskaras are dominant. It vacillates. Consciousness can attain true poise only when the ego mind with all its attendant sanskaras terminates. When they end, only then you can achieve true poise. This is effected through the emergence of the unlimited and ultra sanskaric individuality that comes into its own upon the inheriting of consciousness, eternal existence, which is true immortality. In other words, as long as we are not truly dead to individuality, dead to the ego mind, we will not experience divine individuality or the state of liberation or moksha.
No, ultra sanskaric means extreme or peak individuality.
Say no? I couldn't. Okay. Any questions? No questions asked. So I think we end over here. We'll continue in the next turn. We are ending on page number 108. Thank you, Baba, and thanks to all of you. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you.